Today, I'm hosting Joe Lebron from New York, one of my favorite cities in the world. Um, for those of you who do not know Joe, Joe runs a top team in New York. I think it's the one of the most successful teams around Staten Island and the New York area. You're very focused on high level of service to your clients, and you're a great ambassador for Real. So thank you for that. Joe, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Well, thank you for the great intro there, Tamir. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Joe Lebron. I work in the Staten Island, New York real estate market. Was born in 1982 here in Staten Island and been here all my life, born and raised. I decided to get into real estate in 2002 against the wishes of my parents. I was about 21 years old. I entered the business in 2003, actually, after I was licensed. I've been a full-time realtor ever since then. I initially started with a local franchise company and started as a buyer's agent early in my career. I was 21, so it was challenging to get adults to trust you to sell their home. So I focused on buyers for a couple of years. After that, I decided that I would like to enter into the listing field. I stayed full time. I realized the only way to make a career in real estate was to really concentrate on helping homeowners get their homes sold and in turn helping buyers. So I became a top agent by year 3. I was able to weather the storm of real estate up until 2008 when real estate started to collapse and the financial meltdown and the housing crisis of 2008 through 2000 I would say 11, 12. Decided to stay, watched a lot of my colleagues that I made friends with and made some great relationships with over my then 7-year career, leave the business. I stayed. I had adapted to the new market. Decided to open up a real estate brokerage at age, I believe, 28 in 2008. So not the best time to do so. Learned a lot in that venture. Stepped out of the field and more into the broker owner role at that time, my career. After 2 years, realized that I wasn't really living my passion by doing so. My passion has always been in the field, so I decided to give the franchise back at that time. Thankfully, they let me out. I went back to being a solo agent in 2011. I decided to begin to rebuild my team at that time. I joined some other local prominent franchise brands. From that point forward, I decided to focus and concentrate all of my efforts on serving my clients, being in the field, which was my passion, and being able to be out there with the customer. Been in real estate ever since, and then obviously in 2012-13 we did have another issue in the New York market and even around the country with Hurricane Sandy. Developed more talents during that time and helping homeowners who were dealing with their homes being flooded and getting them back on their feet. And then the market recovered, brought us all the way to recent days where through the pandemic, assisting many buyers and sellers and even my agent team in adapting to the market and still becoming and remaining relevant and productive in the industry and in how it's evolved. So it brings me here today to you. And I joined Real about a year ago, and it's been a fantastic experience, and I've never been happier.
Thank you for that, Joe. Going back to being 21, why did your parents try to persuade you not to go into real estate? What were they afraid of?
I think like most parents, we want our children to have more than we have had. And, college was one of those conversations that, was a big one. And, I never really did great in school. Even in high school, I went to a private boys academy and I did well enough to get by, but what really kept me there was my passion for playing football and, being a leader on the football team. So if I didn't have my grades and everything in alignment, I wouldn't be able to step on the field on Saturdays and Sundays. So as I started to wrap up high school and graduated, I did go to college following high school, to St. John's University. And I started to realize that, similar to high school, I wasn't very bookish. I wasn't very, I didn't love to study, at least not the subjects that were being taught. I didn't find myself, I didn't feel like I was at home. And I felt like I was being called in a different direction. So, when I told my parents that I'd like to leave college, it was not, it wasn't a happy moment, and it was frowned upon. But considering I was getting the bills for the college, and those bills were starting to stack up rather fast, and I started to assume this debt, it didn't make any sense for me. So to me, I always felt that I was not so much like my colleagues or like my peers in school. I felt like I had a different calling. I loved people, and I decided that I was inspired by someone, my first mentor, to get into real estate, and seeing his early success as a child and even as a young adult, it inspired me to, enter the field, and the rest was history.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of courage to follow your calling. So well done on that.
Yeah.
When you were talking about being 21, 22 in real estate, and trying to gain your clients' confidence, it reminded me of one of my first jobs in my early 20s. I was in a sales position with a tech company, and all of my peers were in their 40s. All of them were engineers. I was not an engineer. All of them had like 20 years of experience, and I was brand new to the industry, and I didn't have any competitive advantage. So I asked myself, what can I do to really stand out and make sure that the clients actually put their trust in me? And the one thing that I could find was service. If I'm able to give them a great service and answer them at any time, and so they know that whenever they reach out to me, they get an accurate answer quickly, they can reach out at any time, and they just receive a great service, that will be my competitive advantage. And I did that, and I think that helped me a lot. And I guess it worked for you as well back then.
It did. It did. I think the mentor that I chose was critical. There's so many different options to enter the real estate industry. And, if you study the industry as I have, and I'm sure you have, you realize that about 80% of the industry happens to be part-time. Even the full-timers, about 10 to 15% of the business that's conducted on a daily basis is really, well, about 10 to 15% of the industry really is responsible for about 80% of the business that actually is conducted regularly, at least in the New York market.
Yeah.
And I decided that the person that I chose to mentor me, I would never leave their site. I would, at that time, they were the top listing and selling agent in the multiple listing in my market. And they had been for years, and was a very well-known, highly marketed, the best marketer in town. And to me, I just wanted to be on their team and do everything they told me to do, and just watch and I guess you could say spectate what they actually do to have gotten them into the position that they were in. And to me, that was a big step in the beginning stages, because as you know, when you come out of real estate school, your enthusiasm is very high.
Yeah.
And the evolutionary process of a real estate agent is, if out of school that enthusiasm isn't met with good mentoring, good training, good direction, and mindset, over time that enthusiasm wanes, right? And the peaks and valleys of real estate begin, right? Where the longer it takes for you to actually become a productive realtor or actually close your first transaction, can certainly be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's why a lot of licensees don't renew their license after 2 years. I was fortunate enough to find that mentor. And so wherever he went, I went, whether it was to conferences, whether it was to trainings, it was like I was glued to his hip. And, I was his buyer's agent to start, and He was the top listing agent on the island, in Staten Island, in my market. And so the he would be out all day and listing property. And I couldn't go with him everywhere, but I made sure I was the first one in the office every day. And as he was out putting signs in the ground, and again, this was 2003, 2004, 2005, before Zillow, before Realtor.com, before Trulia, before any of the real estate website wave that took over the industry in the past 15 years. So to me, those were up calls. That was floor time. And so I'd make sure I was the first one in the office. As he was putting signs up and getting new properties, 2, 3 a day, the phone would be ringing, and then there would be no one else in the office. So the secretary would just say, hey, you take all of the leads. So I was bombarded with buyer leads and he wasn't really around to train me as much. So a lot of it was me just being thrown in the fire and failing repetitively, and dusting myself off, going to my mentor, asking him what I should do with these situations and giving it another go. And I did that for a couple of years until I realized that I wanted to become him. And I wanted to have a big business that I wouldn't be able to control getting to if I didn't step into the field of becoming a listing agent. So to me, I believe that when I started following him, but more importantly, as I got to that point where I wanted to transition my business, hiring a coach, investing in me, investing in higher education, and surrounding myself with the right people to give me the mindset to have a different approach than your average realtor, and not necessarily do this as a hobby, but really concentrate on becoming my career long term. And I had a lot of people saying, as naturally most of us do when we're at that age, getting into real estate, don't do it. You need to get a real job. You need benefits. You need a salary. You're going to have a family. How could you do this? And I think that sort of ignited me a little bit more to prove some people wrong. And I saw things in myself that I don't believe others did, or at least my mother did, but many other folks didn't. And I was determined to prove them wrong.
Great information. And I wish a lot of newly licensed agents would watch this interview so they can actually learn. That's really valuable. Let me take you back to April of 2020. We are now in April of 2022. 2 years ago, there's a global pandemic. People are staying at home. Nobody goes to their offices. Real estate is at a standstill. What goes through your head in those moments, and how are you planning for the future in times of such severe uncertainty and very extreme circumstances?
That's
especially in New York, and New York was just shut down completely.
It was very hard.
Yeah.
A lot of lack of clarity, and not really knowing what tomorrow was going to hold, what they were trying to do as a nation, however, as a globe as well, and shutting down the industry, not allowing real estate agents to practice real estate in New York. It really became very frustrating. A lot of our peers, even then, decided to leave the industry or just found themselves with no direction. And as I started to reflect on where we were and where we were possibly going, I started to realize that I was going to need to evolve. I was going to need to figure out how to shift my business to not only working the traditional way that I had been for almost 20 years. Next year will be 20 years. But I really need to figure out a way that we could adapt and evolve into a way of doing business that was not going to be the traditional way, but would give us an ability to continue to grow and be relevant. And I think that most of the world was forced to do that, whether it be by utilizing Zoom calls as we are on now, or figuring out how to embrace technology to provide a better experience for the customer that could no longer come into the office. And technically we weren't supposed to be in the office. And so that really just became stuck between a rock and a hard place. But I believe that, God doesn't do things to you, he does them for you. And I think that was happening for most of us, for us to embrace what was going to happen in order to become and evolve into the people that we were going to have to be moving forward in our careers and really in our lives, in any profession and just about any walk of life. Life is not the same since then, and I don't believe it'll ever go back to the way it was. Similar to, you know, whether it be 9/11 changed everything for the world. I believe that the pandemic as well, 20 years later, did something very similar, that life will always be great, but it will never look the way it looked prior to.
Yes, I fully agree on that. What are some of the most important things that you teach your team members? I guess you're getting younger talents that were licensed for just a couple of years, coming into your team, and it's your responsibility to help them build their future. What are those key things that you think you're teaching them that will be vital in their careers and lives?
Excuse me. That's a great question too. I think that marrying the real estate business from day one is critical. I think that you have to say your I do's. I believe that real estate is a great opportunity for young people as well as older. Realistically, the average realtor in New York is 55 and female. Those are the statistics according to New York State Association of Realtors. That number is going to be coming down over time, but as I got into the industry, I was surrounded by folks who could be my parents or my grandparents. And so I was always considered a kid. And whether it be dealing with the public at large, trying to do business with sellers and buyers, or just earning the respect of my colleagues and my peers in the industry, that was a very challenging thing. So I think one of the things that I try to teach my team members, no matter the age, is if you don't get into this industry and decide that this is going to be what you concentrate all of your efforts on, there's really no such thing as a part-time real estate agent. We don't have work hours, so to say, like the typical 9-to-5 employee. The gift and the curse is being your own boss, right? And so if you treat it like a job, it will pay you like a business. But if you treat it like a business, oftentimes it's easy to not show up. It's easy to cut corners. It's easy to believe that certain things don't need to be done in the beginning stages in order to get momentum and evolve into an actual real estate practitioner, right? Because we're not practitioners until we're actually like a surgeon under the knife performing surgery, or like an attorney in the courtroom going to trial representing a client and producing results. So to me, I just really try to concentrate on what are the most important things that they can focus on. Is we as real estate professionals, the number one job of a real estate agent is to solely speak to people. And some may call that lead generation. And like many business, if not every business, the number one goal in owning a business is customer acquisition. And without customers, you don't have a business. Without clients, you don't have a business or income. So really getting familiar with the dialogues of real estate, primarily focusing on helping people. Okay. One of the questions I ask in my interviews is, why real estate? And how much money do you want to make your first year in real estate? And are you willing to commit to this as a full-time business? And it's not that part-time licensees or agents don't have a place in this industry. They encompass 80% of the industry. However, if you want to operate this as a business on a high level and build a career, there's some real things, a few key things that we should focus on right out of the gate, and that we should get really good at as quickly as possible. And it involves a lot of failure. It involves a lot of chasing your tail, a lot of setbacks, and like I said, peaks and valleys. And those peaks and valleys are when you those valleys are when you learn more about yourself than in the peaks. Like when I played sports, you don't learn very much from winning the game, but when you lose the game, you have an opportunity now to not utilize it as a loss, but as a lesson. And so failing forward, failing fast, failing often is not easy, but giving them the courage and the confidence and the comfortability with the dialogues, with the fact that there's two types of people in this world. There's people you know, and there's people you don't know. And naturally, the people you don't know is the largest group, and it always will be. So getting comfortable speaking to strangers, getting comfortable in your own skin. And like one of my first mentors, my second mentor actually, and may he rest in peace, Bill Nasby, he was a Canadian door knocker and he traveled the world. He told me about mindset. And I believe that mindset is probably top three coming out of the gate. And your focus, right? One of the questions I asked Bill as a 23-year-old kid in real estate was, Bill, I'm not making the money that I want to make, and I don't have the business growing to the point where I'd like it to be. And he looked me right in the eyes. It was on a break during a 2-day conference. Remember those when you didn't have to, when you had to go in person to actually meet the trainer and actually show up and pay money and sit there for 6 or 10 hours? Remember those days? It was one of those. And it was on a break. And instead of going and having lunch, I said, I really want to pick his brain. And so I asked him that question, what am I doing wrong? And I'll never forget for the rest of my life and the rest of my career, those words he said to me. And they were, you have a dollar sign on your forehead, and everybody that you meet can see that dollar sign. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Stop focusing on making money. Get really good on focusing on how to help someone that's right in front of you. And when you figure that out, this doesn't become work anymore. This becomes fun, and you have a passion and a purpose for helping people. So stop thinking about money. And I said, wow, he's right. I've been thinking about the money and becoming successful by earning income and having a big business with that mindset. And from that day forward, I changed my focus, right? And there's a saying, you fix your focus, you fix your future. And I fixed my future at that moment by aligning my focus solely on how do I become the best possible person for my client to be sitting with and taking advice from, to where I'm giving them advice, not with my interest in mind, but only with their best interest, whether they decide to do business with me or not. How do I bring value to the equation? How do I get them to see that I'm going to make them the most informed buyer in their market or the most informed seller in their market, and no one's going to commit to that more than I. And from that point forward, coaching became more instrumental to me, and focusing on what the top 1% of the industry has focused on to get them where they are and to keep them where they are.
That's actually fascinating. And let me get your advice on something, because you mentioned the word advice and building actual value for people. How do you manage work-life balance? We are living in a very demanding world and a super demanding industry, and we constantly want to serve and provide great service to our clients and do good by so many people and have impact on so many lives. But at the end of the day, you also need to make sure that you allocate sufficient attention and time to your family. How do you manage to balance that?
Honestly, if it's not in the schedule, it doesn't exist. So to me, discipline. And the way you treat it if you treat it like a job, you can, when you have a job as a salaried employee or anyone that has a boss that they have to answer to every day, that boss gives you your schedule, and whatever's left over outside of that time is your time, and it belongs to who you decide to give that time to, whether it's personally or to your family. So early on in my development, when I hired a coach, one of the first things we got very clear about was my calendar. And I remember it was 2005. In 2005, I got married, bought a house, and had my first child, all before the end of the year. And I hired my first real estate coach. I paid him 500 at the time, $500 a month. I didn't have two nickels to rub together to make a dime at the time. All right. Because I had been pouring all my money back into my business, but now here I am creating a family, in contract to buy a home, have a baby on the way, a marriage to commit to. And so he said, I'm going to take you on as a client, and you may not have the money today, but if you follow my direction and you're coachable and you just do what I tell you to do and show up to the calls, you're going to have the money in 90 days. So I'm going to invest it in you. And I said, thank you. And I just, from that moment forward, I did whatever that man told me to do. And one of the first things he had me do was create my calendar and my schedule. And he said, this life you're creating right now is not going to work if you don't get very clear about when you're going to be on and when you're going to be off. And if you let this business and your clients dictate how you run your schedule, you will never have a life for your family or yourself. And what will happen is burnout syndrome will set in often. And when you burn out, you're no good to your family, clients, or yourself. That's how you become sick. Real estate could make you sick. So I decided at that time, without having my business as large as I was, like in the early stages of building my business, that I was going to take the weekends off. And you say to yourself, as a realtor, the one of the most common things we are known for as realtors is we work weekends.
Yeah.
And I had been working 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day for 2 years at that point. And now here I am trying to shift my business to building this big life that I needed to support, this big business to support this big life. And he said, the truth is, Joe, if you do what you're supposed to do and what I'm going to coach you to do Monday through Friday, and you follow the schedule and you follow the plan, you could make more money and have a bigger life in real estate than people who work the weekends and 7 days a week, and you could have your weekends off. And I didn't know how he was going to do it. And how he convinced me was, well, that beautiful child you have on the way and that wife that you just married and all of this life you're creating, do you think that they're going to wait around for you? And you think that don't you believe you're going to regret not spending the time with them? So if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. The business is going to consume you. So at that time, I literally blanked out Saturday and Sunday in my calendar. And it's not that I wasn't available on the telephone or via text message or answering emails, because naturally we have no choice but to do those things. But I was present. I was with them. On Saturday, on Sunday, I got to go to the games. I got to go to all of the events. I got to spend the quality time. And what I found was, if I just made my calls, if I just did my follow-up, if I booked all of my appointments, if I convinced myself and my clients and industry that I was busy on the weekend. And sharing what busy means is not always required. I'm booked means I'm booked. When your doctor tells you that he's not available this week, he doesn't tell you why. Yeah. He doesn't tell you why the appointment, the next available part of his schedule is in a week from today or a month from today. He just tells you this is the next time I have available. So I began to build that habit to just block my weekends, concentrate on being where I am when I'm there instead of being somewhere else. And then that forced me, Tamir, to take my business so seriously from Monday morning till Friday evening. And then it became a habit. And then once it became a habit and I started to become a high level agent and a top agent in my market, and no one believed me that I didn't work the weekends. There were times when I said to myself, imagine if I worked the weekends, how well I can do. And our coach would tell me, no, you're not going back ever. And I would block out Saturday mornings, all right? Because there are times when our clients are not available Monday through Friday. And so I needed to have a small window that I can make myself available for high priority meetings. And so I did that. And I said, you know what? Saturday morning from 8 till 11 a.m., I'm going to keep a window open in my calendar, and those would be my high priority appointments. And the rest of the time became my family's, and it balanced me, right? That gave me the ability at that point to feel like I had a work home life balance, and it made me a better agent because when I was working in the business Monday through Friday, I was better rested. I was better focused. I wasn't being pulled in my mind to this concept that I've never had a day off, or I haven't had a day off in months. And I was doing that for 2 years. And once I stopped doing that, I realized how much my productivity went up, and then how much more I can make myself available for my family. And then after that, once you create that life, there's no going back.
Yeah. Great advice. And we're at the end of our time here. I wish we had more time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I have to say that I learned a lot, and I'm taking a lot of takeaways in for my personal career in life out of this conversation. So first of all, thank you very much for sharing all of this information with us. And second, I think we're meeting in 2 weeks in New York. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in person in some time now, and you know,
It's about time.
as I look back at our last meeting at the NASDAQ where we launched our EAX in Times Square, just the energy and the vibes that you brought to the room, and just your focus and vision, it's very contagious. We really enjoy your company. I'm really looking forward to being in person with you.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Likewise, Tamir.